In today's show, we recap the Blazers season, which came to an end Sunday in Sacramento. We'll look back, look ahead. What happened and what's next with the Trailblazers? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. As Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, we are recapping the season, a requiem for the Blazers 2023-2024 season, which came to an end Sunday in Sacramento. We'll do our fastest recap in the West. Then I want to talk about a lost year. I asked Chauncey Billups about this last week prior to the Blazers game against the Golden State Warriors. I asked him about the sort of how he views a lost season. And before we get into exit interviews and all that's coming on Monday, you're listening to Monday, April 15th show. Get your taxes in. Appreciate you listening. But before we get into all of that, and this is sort of revisited, and we'll talk about it at length, Chauncey shared some thoughts that I think are honest and earnest about this year, which was indeed a lost season. I do not think you can slice it any other way. And then what I want to do to close the show is talk about what's next. What's next matters. That's the most important thing for this season, is where do they go from here? We'll talk about where they are and where they're headed to close the program. But let's do what we do. Our fastest recap in the West for the Blazers 23-24 season. Usually these things start in October. This one starts in July 1st, when Damian Lamont Ollie Lillard, a pillar of the Blazers franchise, formally requested a trade specifically to the Miami Heat. It launched a months-long saga, over 3 months-long saga of a war between fan bases here in the Pacific Northwest and deep in southern Florida. It launched a strange public beef between Damian Lillard and the Blazers front office, and general bad vibes were had by all until things were finally finished, clarified, and Damian Lillard was not traded to the Miami Heat. In fact, he was traded to the Milwaukee Bucks in exchange for Drew Holiday, and the Blazers then flipped Holiday to the Boston Celtics and came away with, through a series of trades, DeAndre Ayton, rookie Toumani Camara, and veterans Malcolm Brogdon and Rob Williams, in addition to many draft picks, several first-rounders, swaps, and all. This was just days before training camp and less than 2 weeks before the start of the regular season, and the Blazers era, the new era and the next era of the team launched in earnest on October 25th when they played the Orlando Magic on opening night. But what would be a theme for the season, the Blazers didn't even get through one game without losing a key player. Anthony Simons tears a ligament in his thumb and would miss the next 18 games. And the Blazers missed him and started to be a theme for the season, missing folks that would have helped you learn more about who you are. On November 3rd, 6 games later, the Blazers beat the Grizzlies in overtime at home at the Moda Center, an overtime win to improve the record to 3-3 and notch a 3-game winning streak, what would be the longest winning streak of the entire season way back on November 3rd. In that game, Scoot Henderson, the Blazers rookie point guard, who they drafted 3rd overall and was supposed to be perhaps the franchise's next great player, missed the first of what will be 9 games with a right ankle sprain. Again, a theme for the season. On December 23rd, just heading into the week of Christmas, DeAndre Ayton missed the first of 11 games. He actually hurt himself maybe before that, but that week of Christmas, his first game that he missed was the December 26th, He missed the first of 11 games with a knee injury and then a 12th due to an ice storm that left him stranded at his home. The theme of the season. Folks missing time. In January, the Blazers kicked off the new year in 2024 with a road trip from hell. Or for my younger listeners, a road trip from heck. They lost 6 of 7, including a 62-point loss one of the worst losses in the history of the NBA. And in that game, they not only got thrashed by the Oklahoma City Thunder, they also lost Shaedon Sharpe for what would be the final game of his season. He had been dealing with an abductor strain, a groin strain, or a lower abdominal strain since December, and trying to continually returning and trying to play through it. He left the game after about 20 minutes against Oklahoma City in an absolutely wild, historic beatdown, and would not return for the remainder of the season. January didn't go great, but it included the Blazers' signature win on January 31st when Damian Lillard returned to the Moda Center with his Milwaukee Bucks, wearing the green and cream of Milwaukee, and the Blazers stunned the world, beat Dame, beat the Bucks, and got their signature win of the year. Truly, the good vibes would not last because that was on January 31st, and the Blazers went into February and came out with 0 victories. 9 losses in February, a winless February. But it did include a minor trade. On the trade deadline on February 8th, the Blazers didn't make any major moves. I think it was speculated pretty openly that the Blazers would make maybe many moves, or at least some moves, and instead the Blazers made a minor move, trading a heavily protected second-round pick for Delano Banton and cash. A young veteran point guard Delano Banton with some intriguing tools would be the only player the Blazers added to the new team. But the winless February carried over into March, where things didn't get much better. The Blazers closed the season losing 15 of 17, including another 60-point loss. Just 77 days after a 62-point loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Blazers lose by 60 in Miami, perhaps getting revenge for their perceived slight that Joe Cronin refused to negotiate in earnest with the Miami Heat over the summer. So the team took it out on him, and they beat the snot out of the Blazers. Lose by 60 on March 29th to close out Leap Day. Excuse me, it's not Leap Day. It's a month after Leap Day. To close out March, the Ides, indeed, a 60-point loss in Miami. And the Blazers head into April limping home. They get a couple wins against Washington and Charlotte, and then it all ends Sunday. 121-82 in Sacramento against the Kings. The Blazers hold most of their regulars out and roll out a ragtag group, a mash unit even by their standards, a team that started 35 different starting lineups during the regular season. And the season ends perhaps fittingly with Delano Banton setting an NBA record for most missed three-pointers, 15 without a make in a game, 0 for 15 prior to getting ejected for a flagrant 2. Blazers finish at 21-62 for the season, their worst record since the 05-06 season, and matching their second worst win percentage of all time. Only one season in franchise history, which started back in 1970, have the Blazers won a lower percentage of their games played. According to Clean the Glass, the Blazers finished the year with the 29th rated offense, that's the second worst in the league, and 23rd rated defense, the 29th worst net rating, a hair worse than the Detroit Pistons and a hair better than the Charlotte Hornets. The Blazers end up tied with the third worst record in the NBA and head into the offseason with uncertainty, a year that was indeed lost because of that theme, because of the too many players miss too much time. They don't know what they have. I think it came to, quite frankly, a merciful end Sunday. They didn't need to play any more games. They knew who they were, and they had started losing on purpose, as they've done for 3 consecutive seasons. So that puts a bow on it, albeit a ragged bow that has tendinitis. Last week, on Thursday, I asked Chauncey Billups if he viewed this season as a lost season, and I thought he gave an earnest and honest response to the question. He didn't say lost. He didn't want to say lost. But he admitted that the Blazers missed a major opportunities. Let's talk about how Billups views this year and how I view this year as a earnestly lost season, a truly lost season. A year where the Blazers just don't know anything. A year that was supposed to be about collecting data. They know very little about who they are. Let's talk all about that in the second segment. First, I want to tell you about Gametime. It's the spot for last-minute tickets. Look, no more Blazer games left this year, so if you procrastinated this long, you're not going to be able to go to Blazer games. But if you live in the Pacific Northwest, you're going to have Seattle Mariners baseball games that you can procrastinate about all summer long. The WNBA team, the Storm, are going to be probably awesome this year. So if you are considering going to a Storm game and you wait, well, use the Gametime app. If you're a procrastinator, they got priority last-minute deals for you. Save up to 60% on last-minute deals for sports. You can also use it for concerts and going to comedy shows and all that. But for my sports fans out there, they are the spot for last-minute deals. They even got flash deals where you can check the app, and they've got exclusive deals on various seats at the arena. And what I like is they got all-in pricing. What you see is what you get. You open up the phone, you search for the game you want. You got a little picture of the arena or stadium that you're heading to, and they're going to show you and say, hey, that's going to cost you $71. And when you get to checkout, it costs you $71. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the redemption code LOCKEDONNBA, that's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Today's show is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. Listen, you're going to have some downtime during the NBA playoffs, right? You're not going to be watching the Blazers games, but you're probably going to be watching games. Say you're sitting on your couch, goes to halftime. You don't want to watch the halftime show because the Four Letter Network has a terrible halftime show. So you say, what am I going to do? Fire up Monopoly Go. Go embarrass some of your friends. That's right. The smash hit mobile game, Monopoly Go, lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone. Anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. You can make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. And you can charge others rents for trying to stay on your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. All right. The Blazers are going to hold exit interviews tomorrow. And at exit interviews, they will talk at length about how they view this season. And tomorrow's show, I'll talk all about exit interviews and what we learned. And Joe Cronin's going to speak, and I think it's really important. He doesn't address the media very often, but to listen to what he says, because for the most part, he says things that are worth parsing, even if untrue, I think is how I view most of Joe Cronin's public comments. But before we get there, on Thursday evening, prior to the Blazers game against the Golden State Warriors, I asked Chauncey Billups whether he thought this year was a lost season. Because to me, it is without a doubt. Because the whole point of this year, and you can go check the tape if you're curious, is that this year was about data collection. I was saying this back in October, maybe even September. This year was about finding out what you have, so you can figure out what works and what doesn't, and then move forward from there. This whole point of this season was not to win games. Going 21-61 is probably great in the grand scheme of things. Not very fun to watch, not very fun to podcast about, quite frankly, but for where the Blazers are in the nascent stages of a true rebuild, losing a bunch is it doesn't guarantee you get good, but it's the best way. It's the best way to give yourself opportunities to get good in this league, because star players don't change teams in free agency. Star players don't sign with the Blazers in free agency. The Blazers don't really have assets to trade for a star player right now. And the best way that smaller market teams get stars is they get in the draft. And the way you get into the draft and that high up the draft is losing games. It's maybe a bad system, but it's how it works. The losing is not the lost season. That's not why this is a lost season. The lost season is because the Blazers don't know who they've got. They don't know who they are. Who is this team? They're a young team with some intriguing parts, but the core pieces, you don't know what fits and what doesn't. A name that I left out of that fastest recap in the West was after just 6 games, Robert Williams shut down for the year with knee surgery. And to talk to Robert Williams, he spoke at exit interviews on Friday evening. He did not sound like someone confident in that he will be back and available at training camp. He sounded like someone very cautious, hopeful that he'll be cleared for 5-on-5 this summer and then see what's there. He did not sound like someone who was like, yeah, I'll be there. See you in October. He said, to me, my read on it was that he was very cautious in putting a timeline in his return to the court. A lost season. Malcolm Brogdon did not play a single minute after the All-Star break due to a nagging elbow injury that cost him his functional play in the playoffs last year, and perhaps a trade earlier in the offseason when the Celtics were exploring other moves. A lost season. So I asked Chauncey about it. And he didn't want to say lost season. He didn't want to use that language. And I think words matter. I think word choice matters. I try to be intentional with the words I use here. So I can understand someone when you ask them a question, trying to be intentional about the words they do and do not use. And they're the way they assess things. But Billups basically said it's a lost season. He said that the hard part is that they just can't grade what they have. And I think that's the whole point. They can't grade what they have. He thinks that if this team was fully healthy, all 82 fully healthy, that they would be a fringe play-in team. He pointed to the depth of the West, and at the time, singling out the Lakers and the Warriors, who were at the bottom of the play-in, and said, you look at those teams, and this particularly the Lakers have mostly had solid health this year, and they're at the bottom of the play-in. Lakers ended up in the top half of the play-in, but this was before the weekend, and things sorted themselves out. But he said that he thinks the Blazers, if fully healthy, would be competing for the bottom of the play-in this season, if fully healthy, and you can never guarantee full health. He said, I feel like we've got a pretty good roster over there, injured, but not that good. Right? Like he admitted pretty openly that even if this team was fully healthy, there's something like the 11th or 12th best team in the West if it all goes right with perfect health. That they were a long way away just by virtue of how talented they are. And that moreover, they weren't ever fully healthy. So even if he thinks that's maybe what they would have been, he can't grade what they have. And then he mentioned another thing. He mentioned that we don't even know all of the combos that work. And to me, this is the core part of why this is a lost season. I think it's pretty clear that Scoot Henderson and Anfernee Simons is not a backcourt you can move together into the future with. One, because it would be kind of wild for the Blazers to build another roster with an undersized offense for shooting guard around a point guard who's not exactly gigantic in his own right. Scoot's totally normal size and even maybe like long arms, giant hands, like has some attributes that make him like a big guard. But like Anfernee Simons at the 2 is small, and building another roster with them at the 2, with Simons at the 2 next to any guard, basically, would be a very bizarre choice moving forward, considering the last decade of the Portland Trailblazers. I think it's pretty clear that duo doesn't work together. They played over 600 minutes together, were outscored by 241 points when they were on the court. They got thrashed in their minutes. Part of that is that Scoot Henderson was very bad for most of the season, but it's probably untenable. But the rest of the roster, you just didn't get to use the combos. Like, I think you could have guessed that combo wouldn't work in and of itself. Simons playing the 2 is probably not viable for like a good NBA team moving forward, period. But even all the mix and match combos that you could have tried to say, hey, does this work? Or how does it work? Or what would you need to make this work? Okay, this doesn't work this way, but would it work that way? Okay, it doesn't work with, what if we were really big next to these guys? What if we played 2 centers? What if we played Jeremy Grant at the 3 and et cetera, et cetera? Like, what if we got gigantic? What does Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson look like? What does Malcolm Brogdon look like next to the youngsters? Maybe he's the vet we hold on to, et cetera, et cetera. Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson played 322 minutes together in 22 games. Shaedon Sharpe played 32 games this season total, and just 22 next to Sharpe, and just 320 total minutes. You would like 1,000. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, maybe like 800 and some of them next to each other is more realistic, but you would like 1,000. You would like them to play a ton of minutes together and figure out what it looks like and let them gel and let them figure it out. And that's what Billups said. We don't even know what the combos look like. This entire season, the Blazers played 4 games in which all 6 of Scoot Henderson, Anfernee Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, Malcolm Brogdon, and Jeremy Grant and DeAndre Ayton were healthy. That's not their 6 best players probably, but it's their 6 core players in terms of having to make decisions on in the near and medium term future. the four guards, Scoot, Shaden, Ant, and Malcolm Brogdon, you have to straighten that out in some way. Jeremy Grant is you just gave him $160 million. How he fits with the other five guys and combinations of them really matters. And DeAndre Ayton is the central piece that was returned as part of the Damian Lillard package. How he fits with that crew and how he plays with any combination and all of the combinations of those guards really matters. And his fit next to Jeremy Grant really matters for your decision-making moving forward. And while various combos of them played more minutes together all season long, the six of them, all healthy in a time when you could make basically what would be full roster decisions, played 4 total games. The other 78, at least one of them, and oftentimes multiple of them, were missing time because Ant got hurt early in the first game of the season. DeAndre Ayton got hurt right around Christmas, and then in the middle of January, Shaden Sharp got hurt and never returned. They just don't know what they have. It's a lost season because you don't know the combos. You lost the opportunity to learn who you are. It doesn't mean that they're screwed for life, right? Like this I'm not trying to paint this as like it's extremely Jover, Mr. Cronin, but I came away from this season saying, I don't know. And a whole year of I don't know, of uncertainty about what works and what doesn't work and who's good and who's not and all those things. Like, I think we have a sense of some stuff. But not getting to see Shaden Sharp play in various combinations and not getting to see DA play in a whole bunch of minutes with the two young guards, it is a lost season. As Chauncey Billups said it, we can't even grade what we have. And I think that's the truth. I think you might be forced to grade it, and I think that's the problem. And that's what I want to talk about to close the show. Regardless of the lack of information they have, and they don't have much information, and to be clear, most of that is just bad luck. There was some stuff maybe where Billups was wary to play some combinations together because they were bad, and it's like, who cares? Who cares? You're gonna lose 60 times, but I think for the most part, the 97% of it is because of bad luck, because of injury luck and health. And I think health, generally speaking, I would put that in the luck category. Obviously, for some guys, it's different. But even with bad luck, even with uncertainty, you got to make decisions. What the heck are you going to do? What's next? Let's talk about that, because they have to do some stuff. They've put themselves in the have to bucket for this summer. Let's talk about why they have to do things, have to make tough decisions. That's what we'll do to close the show. First, I want to tell you about PrizePicks. It's daily fantasy made easy. It's the number one daily fantasy sports app. There's over 3 million members already using PrizePicks. It's the easiest, most exciting way to get in on the action while you're watching your favorite sports and your favorite players. You just pick more or less on a 2 or more player stats projection, and then you can win some money if you get it right. The playoffs are a-coming. In hockey and in basketball, you can get in on all of it. And you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. The play-in round starts April 16th, 17th, and 19th in the NBA, and then the playoffs begin in earnest on April 20th. So why not go have a little fun? I play PrizePicks. I mostly play basketball. I probably won't dabble too much in hockey, but you can have a little fun. You can have a little fun on a super easy to use app. So download that app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's that the promo code for you is LOCKEDONNBA, and they will match you dollar for dollar on your first deposit up to $100. It's PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. So what the heck did they do from here? Well, one thing they do is celebrate. They celebrate. That's right. Even during a lost season, there's reason to celebrate. And that's because our beloved Charlotte Hornets got a win over an aggressively tanking play to lose, booed by your home fans in game 82, Cleveland Cavaliers. truly soulless loss by the Cleveland Cavaliers benefits the Blazers a great deal. And because the red hot Spurs, you can't slow them down, won a game against the Denver Nuggets, the frickin' champs, on Friday, and then followed that up with a beatdown of the hapless Pistons without Victor Wembanyama in the lineup. The Spurs closed the season on a 2-game winning streak. The Hornets win game 82, and the Blazers do what they do. They lose, and then they lose some more. There's actually something very poetic about how the Blazers ended the season. Scoot Henderson in his final 3 games had 2 games, back-to-back games, where he's like, awesome first half. You can see how you can see the tools, right? You can see the playmaking, his jumpers going in. He's making good decisions. He looks all like that. And then against the Pelicans and the Golden State Warriors, 2 awful second halves where it's like, oh my goodness, he's like, woof, woof, woof. This is maybe isn't the progress I had hoped for. And then against the Rockets, playing not their whole group, but no Fred VanVleet, no Alperen Sengun, but like mostly their like lineup, mostly their guys, mostly NBA players. He was freaking great. But then they capped him at 35 minutes, and he sat and watched the final 9 minutes of the game because the Blazers had like overextended him and played him 40 minutes a night in the last 2 games. And so they had to, when he's playing truly his best basketball game of the entire season at the end of the year, they hold him out for health reasons because the games no longer matter, and there's no reason to over-index Scoot and play him 43 minutes in game 81. Something beautifully poetic about the Blazers season. When they finally get it all figured out, they are being responsible and cautious with a young player's health, maybe something that they weren't doing all season long. But because the Hornets win, because the Blazers do what they do and lose, and because the Spurs won a couple games, the Blazers now find themselves tied with the Hornets for the third worst record in the NBA, which means they will split 265 combos for the first pick. How it works if you're tied in the lottery is that so the Blazers and Hornets will combine the combos for third and fourth, and then you split those combinations, and then you do a coin flip for the last one. So the Blazers will get 132 combos, and then they'll coin flip to see if they get the 133rd or it goes to the Hornets. Combos, by I mean combination of numbers that when they would come up in the lottery machine, that's the magic of the ping pong ball sound. That's what you're rooting for in May. The magic of that sound, the Blazers will either have a 13.2 or 13.3% chance of getting the number 1 overall pick. They will have a roughly 50% chance, depending on the flip, 50.1, 50.2 of a top 4 pick. They're basically a coin flip. This time theoretical, not literal, away from getting a top 4 pick. Really, I mean, if you're going to lose like they did, a masterful tank job. So that's what's next. Is that we're about a month out from the NBA draft lottery and figure out where the Blazers will select. But where they will select, it's obviously a massive part of what's next, right? If they get the number 1 overall pick, it changes things. Depending on where the Golden State Warriors fall, if they do not make the playoffs, they will be in the lottery as well, and that will give the Blazers potentially 2 lottery picks or a promised pick in 2025 if the Warriors jump up into the top 4. But because the Blazers didn't make any decisions on their sort of long-term core guys at the trade deadline, and you can argue that they didn't do that because the deals weren't there, and I think that is perhaps the most reasonable argument, but it doesn't stop them from being in the position they are in, which is that they got to do something this summer. They cannot do it. The opportunity to do nothing has passed them by. Patience is a virtue until it isn't, and now the Blazers find themselves in a position where they have 11 guaranteed contracts on the roster and 3 non-guaranteed contracts. Those 3 non-guaranteed contracts are Delano Banton, Jabari Walker, and Toumani Camara. The only player walking in free agency this summer is likely to be Moses Brown. Everyone else is either under contract for next year or on a non-guaranteed deal. Like Banton, Abari, and Toumani. It would be bizarre if the Blazers don't bring back Toumani Camara, and I think it's a fairly likely shot that they bring back Jabari Walker. I don't know about Banton because his role on this at the end of the year was very different from what his role would be on like a fully healthy roster, and like he has some warts, right? Like he's an intriguing player, but he's not like so good that it's like you have to bring him back no matter what. He's probably an NBA player. Whether he's an NBA player for the Blazers remains to be seen. But that's 11 guaranteed, 3 non-guaranteed. That's 14 on a 15-player roster. not counting the two ways. That's 14 spots somewhat spoken for. We'll call them 12 and some change spots somewhat spoken for. 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. Right now, as the Blazers stand, not even counting the non-guaranteed guys, the Blazers are over the salary cap and just $4.2 million away from the luxury tax. They're not going to pay the luxury tax next season. There's no way. It would be straight up irresponsible to do that on a bad team. You don't want to start the potential repeater clock until you're good. You want to hold off on that. Not paying the tax when you have Damian Lillard, a red flag. Not paying the tax when you have Scoot Henderson, very normal part of the rebuilding process. Just adding a rookie where they're likely to be in the top 4 is going to push them to a tax team. It's also going to, do you run back the roster that just won 21 games? Do you say, okay, you know what? We might have won 34 games if we were fully healthy the entire year and we played our vets and we tried to win and we didn't give, we realized we held Scoot out of games because he wasn't good early in the season, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, they would have won 34, 35 games if full health, fully trying to win, all of those things, right? They still would have been not a particularly good team. Do you run that back? I don't think you do. I think you are forced to make tough decisions. So what's next is that the Blazers have to trade players. They went in, I was going into the trade deadline I'm not really a yeller, but maybe firmly opining that the Blazers had to trade Malcolm Brogdon because they're just the guard situation was too crowded and they owed it to themselves to try to get something for him, and perhaps his injury and perhaps the market didn't allow him to make the move. But this summer they have to make a decision on probably Anthony Simons or Malcolm Brogdon, if not both. But one of the 4 guards has to play for another team. When you trade guys who make that kind of money, Anthony Simons about 25, Malcolm Brogdon about 22, if you trade either one of them, you're going to bring back money. You're going to bring back players. You're not going to trade them for nothing. So you're going to have to reshuffle some things. This group has to change. And because the Blazers did not make any moves at the trade deadline, they find themselves in a have to, not should or want to or whatever, have to. They have to shuffle things around heading into the next season. Because I don't think they're going to, there's just no way they bring in 4 rookies, but they're going to bring in a rookie almost certainly. If not 2, I think 2's probably the max considering how young this team already is, but they're going to have to bring in some rookies. They're going to have to make some decisions on their veterans, and they're going to have to look different in the fall by virtue of the decisions they've made. How different remains to be seen. But they're going to have to look different in some form or fashion because they have chosen not to do anything up to this point, and the roster is full and capped out. That's what's next. A dang offseason full of decisions to be made, both in the draft, in probably in the trade cycle more than in the free agency world, but certainly the Blazers could be involved in free agency if they want to add some players. I wouldn't bet on them adding guys that weren't minimum types, but we shall see depending on the types of moves they make ahead of that. If you make trades and send folks out and all those things, and then maybe you are active in sort of the role player level free agency that has become the norm for every NBA team, is adding role players via free agency. That's a big summer ahead. I think it's in some ways cliche to say a big summer ahead for them. It's a big summer ahead. They're all big, right? You try to every year you try to improve, or you try to either your asset base or your team, and with the hope of improving your team in the future. But the Blazers have to do stuff. They have to make hard decisions, and they have to retool a roster that was not good and is still searching for a foundational star. They are very likely to be awful again next season and lose another 55 plus games. But who they choose to lose those 55 games with is incredibly important and informative for how they view this team going forward. And guess where we'll talk about it? Right here on this very podcast. That's the thing about the Locked On family of shows, the network. I'm not going anywhere. The season's done, but we're gonna crank out 5 shows a week until friggin' August. That's what we do. You don't get this anywhere else. So tell your friends about the podcast. I appreciate you listening, and I will talk to you soon.